All right, let's get started. Welcome everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for today's event. We're going to be discussing how Wellstar's health system is building the future of nursing. My name is Iman Abu Zaid. I'm an MD by background. I've been in healthcare technology for the last few years of my career. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Incredible Health, a career marketplace for permanent healthcare workers. Incredible Health is the only platform that allows hospitals to hire permanent and experienced nurses in 20 days or less. We flip the script where hospitals and health systems apply to the nurses instead of the other way around. Joining us today is Jill Case-Wirth. She's the Senior Vice President and Chief Nurse Executive of Wellstar Health System. Wellstar is the only health system in Georgia with a level 1, level 2, and level 3 trauma centers and a dedicated burn center. In 2020, Wellstar opened the largest emergency department in the southeastern US with a capacity to serve over 200,000 patients every year. In 2021, Wellstar Paulding Hospital achieved magnet recognition as well. A few more accolades. People magazine honored Wellstar as one of the 2021 People Companies That Care, and Modern Healthcare recognized Wellstar as one of the 2021 top organizations for diversity. Fortune and Great Place to Work also recognized Wellstar as one of the 2021 100 best companies to work for. Jill has over 15 years of experience as a chief nurse executive and oversees the health system's 7,300 nurses throughout Wellstar's footprint. In her 7 years, now 8th year at Wellstar as CNE, she has worked with state legislators, the Board of Nursing, universities, technical colleges, and high schools to create career pathway programs geared towards earning a Bachelor of Science degree in nursing, among many, many other accomplishments. Jill, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you. I'm really pleased to be with you.
Fantastic. So just for everybody in the audience, just know that we are recording the session today and we will share the recording afterwards. And so this is also designed to be an interactive discussion. So please feel free to send your questions in the chat and we'll answer them as we go along, as well as we have some dedicated time at the end for Q&A too. What we're going to be covering today is innovative ways that Wellstar is addressing the nursing shortage. By investing in the future of nurses, by making it easier and cheaper for Georgia high school and college students to become CNAs, LPNs, and RNs. We'll be covering how Wellstar is helping NPs transition to practice. Jill will also be sharing how Wellstar has become or continues to be an employer of choice for nurses and other support staff. And we'll also be covering how Incredible Health can help hire and retain nurses. Great, so let's get going. So first, let's just do a quick market overview of what's happening in the nurse market today. We are, no surprise to anyone on the call, we are in the midst of a continuing nurse shortage. 1 in 8 Americans works in healthcare today. It has become the biggest labor sector in the country since 2018. But our demand for healthcare as a country keeps going up. Our population is aging. There's some big demographic changes happening in the country, but the supply of workers, the healthcare workers, has not kept up with the demand. This problem is national. It exists not just in Georgia, but throughout the country. We are on track to be 1.1 million nurses short by the end of this year. The annual acute care nurse turnover in the country is at an average of 18.7%, and that has actually gone up since COVID started. Labor as a percentage of revenue does continue to increase because the labor costs, including nurse labor costs, continue to increase. And this is beyond just the temporary workers. Even the permanent workers are increasingly more and more expensive. And the average time to hire a permanent and specialized nurse today is 82 days, which is quite a long time. So I'll pause there. That's a quick overview of what's going on in the market. And Jill, we'd love to hear how you're thinking about addressing the nursing crisis at a high level.
Thank you so much for having me today. At a high level, many of us have managed labor for years, but really the critical leadership skill right now is strategic workforce planning, really trying to make sure that we keep the people at the core of what we do, which is really the focus of people care that we call it at Wellstar, that really is aligned with fulfilling the mission and the vision and the values of every health system within this country. If we've learned nothing else from the pandemic, we've learned about the essential role that nursing plays in the healthcare space. And so it's really important right now as leaders to listen to our team members. We did that during COVID because we recognized we didn't have all the answers. And in order to solve the problems that were in front of us, we brought our teams, those that are closest to the work, to help us solve those problems. This workforce scenario and challenge that we're in is no different. So rounding on your employees and really engaging them in conversations around what is most important to them as an essential workforce for healthcare is critical. As I've been doing that with my nurses across Wellstar, what I continuously hear is flexibility, right? We've heard about the Great Resignation. We've also heard about the Great Reflection. And in that reflection, many nurses, as well as other healthcare professionals, have paused and they've asked themselves what's important to them in their career and in their life. And so when they're talking about flexibility, they're talking about flexible schedules, benefit structures, how they're employed, as we've seen, what education they have, and what type of development we can provide for them over the course of their career. We also know that relationships matter. They mattered during COVID, they mattered before COVID, and they matter now. And I believe that academic partnership relationships are essential to help us to strengthen the workforce through critical training, educational modeling, onboarding, and really helping us with the planning of what is the healthcare workforce of the future.
Okay, got it. So I think some of the data and information you just shared is very consistent with the information and data that we have as well. When nurses are creating their profiles on the Incredible Health platform, we're often asking, what is it that you're looking for in a job, or why are you even considering changing jobs? And the number one reason is career advancement. I'm looking to grow my skills, advance my career, cross-train, whatever, something to do with advancing their career. And the second most common reason is I want more flexibility in my schedules. So very consistent with what you're seeing as well. And so you made a long-term investment, and you have a long-term strategy in place that you're implementing right now to just make it easier to become a nurse in Georgia. Would love to hear just a little more about this program and how you're thinking about it.
Certainly. So you mentioned earlier, I've been a nurse for nearly 4 decades, and I've seen cyclical changes within the workforce over the course of my career. But I'm here to say this is very different. And so we need to be approaching it different. Not only do we need more nurses, but we need more extenders that support nurses, because the crisis and the shortage that we're in is not going to just fade away over the course of the next 12 or 18 months. I would suggest to you that we've got at least a decade of challenge that's yet in front of us. We had a shortage before the pandemic. It's only been exacerbated since then. We were strategic in trying to work on the shortage well before. And so in 2019, we actually launched what we call our Nurse Career Pathway Program. It was the first high school to a baccalaureate of nursing program in the state of Georgia. There was one other state that we met with and some team members to try to create something that would work here in Georgia. And really the program was initially designed to increase nursing and nursing graduates. But with the program, there are opportunities to gain credentials and licensure in different areas like CNA, LPN, associate degrees in nursing, and baccalaureate all along the way. When I talk about relationships, this was kind of my real example of that, where we brought state legislatures, the Board of Nursing, high school counselors, technical college leaders, and deans and directors from universities in both the private and the public sector together to align credit hours and to suggest that we could have a singular agreement and consensus around what this pathway would actually provide. And at each step of the way, there could be a credential that's earned. So for example, they get a CNA when they are in high school. That CNA gives them an entrance into a clinical role within nursing. And of course, we want them to come and work at Wellstar with that. But it also allows them to begin to think about where else do they want to take that clinical progression over a period of time. So we really are focused on that notion of how do you align your core values for people with your pursuit of excellence and begin to instill that within the educational system and match it up to career aspirations for individuals at a very young age.
Okay, this is like that's fantastic. I mean, we talk about the concept of creating a pipeline in nursing and in HR. But I think you've taken the concept of a pipeline to the next level, starting all the way from high school. So could you help us help us understand this just from a student's perspective? Let's say you're a high school student, and you're trying to get through from going from a CNA to a BSN. Like, what does this journey look like for the average student?
So what we've done is we have 3 area high schools that we started the program with. We have more that are on the cusp of wanting to join in. And what we've actually created with many of these high schools is the notion of dual enrollment. And the students then within their 9th grade to graduation can enroll and actually complete up to 26 college credits that are prerequisites, if you will, for a baccalaureate in nursing. These credits are within their high school scope. And so, if you think about it from a parent's perspective, it's a very economical way to get college credits while I'm getting my high school degree overall. I mentioned earlier that they have the stop off at CNA. So as soon as they pass their CNA, we actually offer them an opportunity to practice as a certified nursing assistant in one of our practice environments overall. And then we work with the counselors to get them to think about what is the next step for them. If it's LPN, we've got a technical college pathway that we have with the technical colleges of the state of Georgia. And those 26 credits apply to their LPN. And then they can align those credits and graduate with another credential, which would be the licensed practical nurse credential. That might be a stop off for others, either long-term as a career or as just the next step in their journey. Then we've also aligned that with a college, so you could take those credits and become an ASN, and then ultimately complete your baccalaureate of nursing over a period of time. So it's very linear, but there is flexibility based on the capacity for learning and that student's goals overall.
Got it. Okay, so I'm sure one of the challenges with education in general is how to afford it. And I know that your team has tackled that as well. So how are students financing this education, or how are they able to afford it?
It's really important that those that we employ represent the face of the communities in which they serve. And so, really providing access for education in areas where, diversity and inclusion is important to us as well. So thinking about the affordability factor, there's different financing arms, if you will, within both the high school systems as well as in the college systems. We believe that it is possible for a student to begin this program in high school as a dual enrollee, gain those credits as part of their high school experience, and then have additional opportunities either through tuition reimbursement from an employer like Wellstar as they're an LPN and then going on to a nurse over a period of time, and or use some grant scholarships that are being made available both from the private sector as well as from the public sector overall. So we've kind of, aligned it in such a way that we think it's possible to get to a high middle income wage as a nurse with little or no loans or personal out-of-pocket expenses if we're very thoughtful in partnership with the students, the families, and then the schools that we work with.
All right, that's fantastic. Just reminder to everyone, feel free to submit questions in the chat, and we'll address them as we go as well, and we'll answer them at the end as well. So how are you looking? So you've laid out this program, implemented it, sounds fantastic. How are you thinking about expanding the program going forward?
Yeah, it was interesting that sometimes you never know what's yet to come and how the foundations that you've laid will benefit you moving forward. I believe that the framework of this pipeline program is very applicable to lots of different roles. And nursing is not the only shortage that healthcare has today and will have well into the future. We have utilized this pipeline now and the partnerships, those relationships with the technical colleges and the universities and the high schools, and actually now down to K-8, to really help us imagine other pathways where we have shortages, like surgical techs, certified MAs in our ambulatory settings overall, lab techs. And as we think about healthcare, it's not even just in the direct patient care areas. We have needs and shortages in our finance and billing pipelines, as well as in our informatics and IT systems. And this foundation could be and will be actually aligned with many of those other things. In fact, in the fall of 2020, when we knew the shortage was going to be with us long into the future, because of our relationships, we created a CNA program for our own staff members and new hires, where it was a work-based learning scenario. And our team members got CNAs. And to date, we've graduated over 300 new CNAs into Wellstar through that program. And we stood that program up in 6 weeks because we had those relationships and we had a pipeline to lean into.
Okay, question from the audience from Barbara Kaufman. How long did the pipeline program take to stand up?
You know, if I look back, because it was new and we felt like we were trailblazers in that particular sense, at the table to align all those diverse interests and get to a good product, it was about 14 to 16 months that it took us of meeting, pulling things together. I think maybe we've learned a little bit more about how we could fast track. And I can tell you that it's that basis of that relationship that's got us a CNA program in 6 weeks. It also allowed us to talk with the technical colleges about the curriculum and the length of some of the curriculum. And so we've created a certified MA program now that's not a year long, but it's actually 16 weeks. So really being able to utilize those things to accelerate change management, I think, is something that you'll see, as well as people are willing to come to the table.
Fantastic. And then another question from Laura Hewitt is, how many students do you take per year from each high school?
So we started small because we just didn't know what to expect. So we were taking on average about 10 students from each one of the high schools to get our arms around it and try to figure out where we were at. Obviously, the pandemic was a little bit of a disruptor for this class as those students went virtual. It posed some additional challenges. Yep. So as we're growing the program now, we anticipate we'll be able to double and maybe triple those numbers. But it depends upon how you've seeded the interest in those programs in the earlier years, which is why we're now meeting with the K through 8 students to help them think about this is coming and to talk with their parents.
Got it. So there are a lot of many nursing leaders and HR leaders on the call right now, and probably listening to this recording afterwards too. I guess what's your top tips or advice you'd have for those that are launching similar programs in their locations?
You know, I say this to everyone. It's kind of my mantra in my life is that relationships matter, whether it's in your professional career or your personal career. And I would suggest to you that it starts with those relationships. So if you don't have relationships with deans and directors or with your legislators that are on your educational committees at the state level or your board of regents, understanding the private school sector versus the public school sector is really important. Knocking on those doors, inviting them in. I started when I moved to Georgia because I was new to the area in having a deans and directors breakfast. And I invited them in to say, here's who Wellstar is. Here's what our strategic hopes and dreams are. Here's our planning moving forward. How might we work together? And to be honest, they said, wow, this is the first time anybody's done this. And it started those relationships from scratch, you know, really including people that have big ideas and getting them to the table, because you might have a vision, but it's that collective ideas that is going to get you the strength of that program overall.
Got it. All right. So let's shift for a moment just to the training of nurses, right? And one of the top challenges that we all face is we don't have, enough faculty or team members that can teach nurses. And we see this in we see this bottleneck, frankly, in many different areas. First, there are wait lists of tens of thousands of students who want to get into nursing schools, but the nursing schools can't take on more because they don't have the faculty. We see a bottleneck when it comes to training nurses at hospitals and health systems. There's not enough preceptors and those that are trained, can train and help specialize those nurses. So how do you think about the shortage of nursing faculty or nursing teachers effectively? And how does that dynamic play in your programs at Wellstar?
To be honest, that was some of what I heard when I first came here. And quite honestly, those schools are suffering from some of the same workforce challenges that we are.
Yep.
So how do you approach that and ask yourself, is there something that you, healthcare systems, can bring to the table that would be a win-win for both? And what I consistently heard from my academic partners were, we don't have enough faculty, we can't grow our enrollment because we can't clinically place all the students that we have in those clinical rotations. And so, our thoughts were, how can we help solve that problem? What we've done is looked at our own staff. A large number of nurses today are going on to get their master's degrees and their doctorate degrees. And so I have team members that would love to build out their CV and teach, whether it's clinical adjunct faculty at the bedside or guest lectures within an area of study or curriculum that they have expertise in, like STEM education or leadership overall. So we have, an opportunity for our own team members. We actually have a get together twice a year that says, so you think you want to be academic faculty? And then we invite in our partners to talk about it, to offer shadow experiences, and to talk about what that might look like for the two of us. The other is the clinical placements. So health systems have been conservative, I believe, in offering those, because it does take away from your core staff, right? Yep. There's a productivity impact of it overall, but it also can bring great joy to your team members to be able to invest in that future generation of nursing. And those staff nurses oftentimes love to teach as well.
Yep.
So we've found that by opening up our clinical placements, but working with our academic partners so that those are just not Monday through Friday day shifts, right? We do clinical rotations 24/7 across the system and in every area of our continuum that we can provide that in, which opened up our clinical placements. So if we ask them, if I go and say, I need you to increase your enrollment, or I need you to double the number of surgical techs that you're going to graduate in the next 2 years, I have to be able to say to them, and we'll take 100% of your clinical placements and we'll figure out the faculty piece together. So I think that's really, really important, is to think through what you can bring to the table that is a partnership win for the other. And it doesn't have to be dollars and cents. Yep. It really, that human talent, that human resource, and access to your services is really, really important.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've also answered Tina Cartwright's question already. How do you provide clinical instructors from the hospitals so the schools can expand their admissions? And it sounds like the answer is yes. So the next topic we wanted to cover is nurse practitioners, right? And so your team has been helping nurse practitioners transition to practice. Can you share some of the work that you've been doing there as well?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. One of the reasons that the shortage appeared sooner than was anticipated nationally was that we had a large number of young nurses that chose to go on very quickly to get a master's or a doctorate in as an NP. And enter a different work environment and employment model of being one of clinical provider overall. And we saw that here in Georgia. Each state has different practice guidelines, and we are not still at the full scope of practice guidelines here in Georgia. An unfortunate scenario that's happened here is we're graduating more NPs than there are actual NP roles open in the state. And so there's great disappointment, right, of these individuals that had a career goal, they invested, they were successful, they graduate, and then there's not a job for them to be had. And given that reverse scenario, the employment side, the providers and systems oftentimes have the ability to hire experienced NPs and take them over a new graduate, even though they might have worked beside that nurse for the last 5 years in a subspecialty in the hospital. That experience generally was winning out for us. So I was seeing the disappointment. I was hearing from my own team members, you invested in my education, you don't have a job for me. So we started a transition to practice program for our NPs over the course of the last just under 1 year program. And the intention here was twofold. One, I have a nursing shortage at the bedside. I have expert bedside nurses that have now gone on and got an advanced degree. Could I entice them to stay at the bedside a little longer while we're trying to stabilize the core of our staff, and at the same time provide a developmental investment in them that eases that gap towards experience and positions them to be hired into one of our open roles. We do know this will shift, right? We do know that as health systems are trying to solve access issues, they're going to begin to replace some of those physician positions with advanced practice. And so this will shift in the next couple of years, and I don't want to lose that talent, right? From here. So for the first 6 months, although they work their 36 hours in a role that's a subspecialty of their choice, generally in acute care, we use those extra 4 hours a week as an investment in them. And we begin with, really looking at some critical leadership skills and development, communication. We offer shadowing experiences in areas that they might not have considered practicing in overall. And then in the last 6 months, we shifted, we reduced their hours at the bedside, and they get a formal preceptorship with both an NP and a provider in 2 different areas that we believe will be their next journey, where they would start their career as a provider. What we're also seeing is there are a great deal of individuals that went back for the advanced degree and now decided they don't want to be a provider.
Yep.
And what a great opportunity that is, right? To help them explore where that expertise could be applied. We have individuals that have accepted roles as first assist in the operating room. We have nurses that have advanced practice nurses that have accepted roles in leadership roles in stroke programs or cardiovascular programs, and some that have actually gone into true leadership roles within the formal nursing structure within the organization.
Oh, that's great. That's fantastic. Another question that came in related to this topic is from Candy Goulet. In the Bay Area in California, bedside nurses, bedside RNs specifically, often make more than NPs in office practice or in ambulatory settings. This does lead to NPs continuing to work at the bedside, but not necessarily at the fullest scope of their practice. Curious if you have this situation in Georgia, and how do you think about that balance between NPs and RNs?
That is the reality of the scenario, right?
Yep.
That nursing is not immune from market conditions, as we're seeing. So where the shortages are, the wages may be elevated, at least for a period of time. That might cause an individual with an advanced degree to either stay in the bedside, or what I see more often is the hybrid, right? They work as an employer, and then how can I provide them a job too, where they actually can stay at the bedside for either a period of time or to stay current within bedside practice, as that change is so critical. It'll be curious to see what happens with advanced practice wages moving forward. Again, I believe that as we have a growing shortage in primary care physicians and other subspecialty areas, and our models of care need to change.
Yep.
Right? As the revenue streams are changing in healthcare, so will the models of care. And there will be an advantage to have a mix of a physician and an advanced practice individual in that model of care to keep the economic stability of that model of care aligned with the revenue streams that it's supporting.
Okay, got it. And then one more question before we switch into the topic of care models and how they're shifting. This is a sort of a question from Janice. You mentioned the programs and the pathways for nursing. How do you prevent staff from quote unquote eating their young?
That's a term that's always hurt my heart.
Yeah.
As a nurse, right? And unfortunately, there are areas where the culture still allows for that to happen. I think it's really one of the opportunities that nursing leaders have, is to talk about the reality of where the workforce is and where the workforce is going. So when I talk with my more senior nurses about this, we talk about the importance of, there is not going to be a large pool of experienced nurses to hire from, right? We're going to see a flip. Historically, you could look at and do predictive analytics and say, okay, we're going to hire X number of nurses over the last year based on retirement rate, age of your individuals, what's your normal turnover rates in each one of your subspecialties, and make an assumption that maybe you're going to hire 40 or 45% new graduates and 55 or 60% experienced nurses. That's all on its head right now, right? It's the experienced nurses that have left the workforce, many of which won't come back. Right. And so we're going to have a high percentage of novice nurses that are going to be in our workforce, and they are going to be critical to our success. And I will tell you that when I meet with my nurse residents, they are some of the most talented nurse scholars I've ever seen, committed and smart and ready to apply those skills. So it's up to us to think about how in that nursing school experience can we better train them. Partnerships work there too. How do we make them more work ready for when they come into our workforce? How is it that we offer nurse externships or fellowships that gives them experiences during their academic preparation that bridges them more securely into practice? Nurse residency programs, essential. Really not just supporting them emotionally, but providing additional development of them both clinically and with those important skills of communication, delegation, crucial conversations, all of those things that make for a really solid nurse. That's what's going to gain the confidence of the more mature nurse at the bedside.
Got it. Okay. So, you've discussed how, you have these programs that you're implementing, the number of CNAs, the number of LPNs is starting to grow. Like, how are you thinking about the care models as we, proceed now into the future?
Yeah. This is, when you get over the shortage and you're tired of talking about that, what do you talk about? You need to talk about how are we going to deliver care differently?
Yep.
Like I said earlier, this is not a short term, it's going to go back to normal. And right now we have 5 generations of nurses that are practicing across the continuum. And what became really apparent to me during the pandemic is those 5 generations of nurses have been educationally prepared to a primary nursing model.
Yep.
We think about it, the very, early in the pandemic, where some of us were thinking, oh, we're going to have to do some team nursing. We're going to have to dust off some of those tiered nursing models that, have been used for disasters and critical scenarios in the past, and think about how we could utilize them. It gave us a little bit of time to pilot some of those models. But what we recognized was that it didn't come naturally for our nurses to work in those models. So we've got to do some of the heavy lifting and the work of partnering with our nurses, again, who are in the work every day, to help us envision what those models could and should be. Many of my nurses would say, well, this is what worked really well during the pandemic, Jill. So could we take this piece of it? And then could we think about the scope of responsibility? And then could we think about who might be best prepared to apply that skill set? So what we've done is looked at all of the support positions to the nurse. We've talked about it for 35 years. How do we get to the nurse to the top of licensure, right? How do we get to the top of licensure practice? It's paramount now that we do that. But we build the right infrastructure to the nurse so they can function there with complete confidence that who they're delegating to is within the right preparation, educational preparation, certification, and scope of what it is that they can do. We also have technology on our side. And what we're seeing, we're just on the cusp of it here, but many of my colleagues across the country have virtual nursing models in place, some in which the virtual nurse actually has a full assignment. Other applications of the virtual nurse that we're seeing is that of support, being that second nurse, maybe for more the novice nurses overall, to do a double check or to look at a wound and help somebody stage it overall, and precepting and supporting in those critical competencies overall, and not taking away from what might be a little bit short-staffed core staffing model that you have overall. We use during the pandemic virtual nursing as a means to really monitor patients for subtle deterioration. That a nurse that was really caring for very complex patients in a difficult time might miss, and make sure that they could see what the virtual nurse was seeing overall. So I think it's really wide open to think about that. What you also have to think about, though, is the who. Just because we have a shortage of nursing doesn't mean that we have an abundance of LPNs. Yep. Very quickly, the doctors would go back and say, go get the LPNs. Well, you know what? When we stopped putting LPNs in acute care, the schools stopped graduating them. So then you've got to go back to your academic partners and say, all right, they're back. in a different way, and we'll help you to clinically prepare them. We also have a runway for unskilled. And this is where that diversity, equity, and inclusion is so important, making opportunities for individuals to enter without a skill set, and then helping them to see what that pathway could be. For many of them, the credential is an internal credential, phlebotomist, GI tech. There aren't certification programs for those, but you can start one. You can have your own. We've trained those individuals for years. And then how do you create stackable credentials, working with your technical schools or your colleges so that individuals can progress in a linear way towards RN or advanced degree clinicians over time.
Okay, and then how, each subspecialty in nursing is so different. How do you think about these care models across different specialties and different subspecialties?
Yeah, they're going to have to be really specialized for the area of study. So, my critical care nurses don't very easily see the role of an extender within their model. In fact, that is a place that some of these advanced practice nurses are really adding great value, because they have been at the bedside. They can support a broader scope of patients, and they can help with some of the novice nurses in that particular realm. But trying to think about what are the non-value added skills, I always say, that are valued by the patient and critical to the care model that someone else other than a nurse could do. For years, it's been, well, we'll let nursing do that. Well, you know what, nursing, enough. We do nursing, and then we think about who else can help us. So we, for example, created a care assistant role. It's somewhat like the concierge, but really supports the CNA, who can now take a broader scope and have additional competencies and move towards an advanced CNA. And so, how do we use that unskilled, but then put them in the work study program so they can become a CNA, and they can then, have a career progression overall. So constantly thinking about what opportunities we have within our workforce to change things up and make sure that everybody, not just nursing, is working at the top of their competency and credential overall.
Got it. Okay. So would love to spend some time now on how Wellstar has become an employer of choice. And there's some very near-term or short-term things that your team has also put in place to ensure that you can hire nurses consistently. I mentioned earlier the reasons why nurses change jobs, right? So career advancement, they're looking for the second most common reason is flexible scheduling. Third most common is they're trying to reduce their commute time or they're relocating. And then the fourth is compensation and their total rewards package. Like how do you think about positioning Wellstar as an employer of choice for nurses?
That's just not something you turn a switch on, right?
Yep.
That's building a culture over time that's recognized as a healthy work environment, one that develops individuals overall and really cares about the people that work for them over time. When I think about the difference in the workforce from what might have been the worker of the past to what is the future workforce, they don't work for paychecks, although compensation is critical, and I'll get to that overall. Satisfaction, they don't work for their boss anymore, right? They don't focus on what they're weak in. Really what we have now is a workforce that is really focused on their purpose.
Yep.
They're really focused on their own personal development and where they desire to go and what we're going to do for them and with them. They don't look for someone to be their boss. They look for someone to be their coach and their mentor. Somebody who takes a personal interest in them and really helps them to think through their career pathway and how to get there, removes barriers, opens doors for them overall. It's about those ongoing conversations between a leader and an employee. So leader rounding on employees isn't just a tactic. It's an authentic leadership skill that you absolutely have got to have. I want somebody to focus on my strengths, right? I want them to say, you know what, you are a great nurse, but your style is better suited in this practice environment, okay, overall. And then, lastly, what they want is they want this, in my generation, we called it work-life balance. Yep. Trust me, it's unattainable. It's just unattainable, right? So what we talk about now is work-life integration. How might there be harmony within those, and how can I make really good choices, and you as the employer provide the environment that allows for me at different stages in my life and in my career to have different opportunities for either role, responsibility, flexibility within my schedule, all of those types of things. Now, compensation we talk about because it is important. It always has been. Nursing, as I said, is essential. It is a critical role in healthcare. And what we've seen is that nurses have recognized that during this pandemic, that everyone else has. And so compensation shifted as the market shortage became more and more apparent. What I'm seeing, though, is particularly with my younger nurses, those 8 years or less, that they don't always understand what compensation is. And so when they see an advertisement for a travel agency or competitor, they see sign-on bonus, right? Mm-hmm. Or they see, dollars per week, but they don't necessarily understand what we call a total rewards package.
Yep.
And so I actually have to, sit down with many of them and say, okay, the most important thing as an employee is your base salary, because everything is based off your base salary if you're a traditional core employee, right? Your time and a half is based off of your base salary, your pension or your 403B matches, the PTO that you earn, for your day's time off. All of that is related to your core staffing. But then you've got to, look at your differentials. And differentials are, meant to provide incentive for less desirable or short-term needs. Differentials can go away. So, always make sure that when you're adding your differentials into your core, that you recognize that there is some vulnerability with those types of salary adjustments that are there. And then what is the benefit package, right? I know I don't think about retirement when I'm 23 or 25 years old, but quite honestly, accumulating wealth over my lifetime is important and will be even more important for these nurses. So helping them to think about, how that match savings or a traditional pension may play out for them, the value of life insurance, the value of benefits at different points in your life, like adoption benefits or time off for maternity leave overall, or paternity leave, which we have both. Concierge services, that makes my life easier. They pick up my laundry from the dry cleaners. They can pick up my car and go get an oil change, so I don't have to do it on Saturday and I can take my kids to the park instead. So really thinking about what's that total rewards package, and then flexibility. Yep. It's easy for us as nurse leaders to get really caught in the 2 12-hour shifts, because boy, is it easy to make a schedule. Yeah. We've got to be thinking about what makes a difference for the individuals. We have nurses that want to put their kids on the bus in the morning and be there when they get off at the end of the day. So what about 6-hour shifts, that bridge some of the time where we have large numbers of discharges and or admissions? What about the wise nurse who can't stand in the operating room for 12 hours at a time anymore, but has the wisdom of those specialty procedures? Could we do 4 hours? Could we do 10 hours? Could we do weekends only for those that are in school, or if it's with their partner's lifestyle? So all of those things we have to be mindful of, and not just be mindful of, we have to take action on. We have to have an opportunity to employ each and every individual the way that it fits best for their life.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're definitely seeing that the employers that offer more flexible scheduling options hire more. And it is what essentially the market is demanding. It's what the talent wants. So yeah, certainly it is definitely more operationally complex to do that internally, but I think we're at a point where we don't have a choice, right? So retention is something that your team has done a great job with. I know that Wellstar's retention is far better than the national averages. Curious just how you think about the concept of nurse retention and what you do to support your leaders to make sure that happens.
Yeah, retention is really critical. So you can, do all the best that you can to recruit in, top talent, but if you can't retain the team members that you have, and that was heartbreaking, to be honest, during the pandemic, very committed nurses that had life circumstances that led them to take a travel assignment, being prepared to welcome them back in a genuine way. without any concern or resentment is really, really important. Because there was a lot personal about the pandemic that happened to individuals and to families overall. And so retention is one of those that you can't take one step in one direction. I think it still goes back to relationships and culture, and really being mindful of, is there a personal connection? Just like between a patient and a clinician, there needs to be a personal connection between an employee, a staff nurse, and their leader. Still the number one reason for leaving employment is largely the lack of a relationship between a manager and an employee. And so being really thoughtful about creating those relationships, honoring that voice, listening to what is important to that individual, and trying to see if in fact you can provide that for them. We have rounding schedules that we ask each one of our managers to follow, to have individual development plans for each of our team members, so that we know what they're looking for. Leadership talent planning, so you've got a succession planning model that individuals know that there's an opportunity that will be available over time in different areas, and then developing them and offering them assignments outside of their work environment that continue to help them grow and develop and learn as individuals. I think the leadership development is something that during the pandemic, many of us had to put on pause.
Yeah.
And we did. I have leaders are from the bedside to the boardroom here at Wellstar. But we start formal leadership development with charge nurses overall. And we've got really robust programs associated with them, but we went almost 2 years, and we hired a lot of leaders in that 2 years without being able to offer many of those courses, that curriculum, and the necessary coaching and mentoring that we needed. So we didn't just restart it. We actually had to go back and relook at the relevance of the curriculum and make sure that we were preparing and developing people for what the workforce and the environment of healthcare is now. Don't underestimate the importance of leadership development.
Absolutely. Okay, so we're going to spend a few minutes just reviewing what it is that Incredible Health does, and then after that, with our remaining time, we'll do Q&A, and then I know that Jill also has some key tips for preventing nurse burnout as well. So very briefly, Incredible Health is a career marketplace for healthcare workers. It is used at Wellstar as well. And hospitals, they use our custom matching technology to hire high quality permanent nurses in 20 days or less. It's already been used. Incredible Health is currently being used at over 500 hospitals across the country, including very big health systems like HCA Healthcare and Kaiser Permanente. It's used at academic medical centers like Johns Hopkins and Stanford and Cedars-Sinai, and lots of community hospitals as well. We're live in 25 states, including the state of Georgia. And so what the platform does is that there's a few unique things about it. First, the employers are applying to the talent, or applying to the nurses instead of waiting for the nurses to apply to them. We've really flipped it around. So it's a very nurse-centric or candidate-centric model. And as you can imagine, the nurses absolutely love that, because they get interview requests from different employers, say in the Atlanta area, and they get to choose which interviews to accept or decline. We've also built in proprietary screening, so that talent is pre-vetted or pre-screened before they are put in front of, say, Wellstar's talent acquisition team. We also provide custom matching algorithms. So it's important that we are matching the right nurses to the right opportunities at the health system. And then a robust set of data analytics on speed and utilization, so we can really identify bottlenecks that are happening in the hiring process too. We also offer a whole range of free tools and services to nurses across the country. And this is all available for free to every single nurse in the country. They don't have to use our hiring platform to use these other services. And overall, Incredible Health is always free for nurses. We offer free continuing education courses to US nurses available in our apps. It's accredited in all 50 states. And, so a nurse never has to pay out of pocket for continuing education. We have free nurse salary estimators. Each nurse gets assigned a talent advocate, which is sort of like a career coach that supports them as well. And there's also an exclusive social network or community for nurses inside of the Incredible Health apps, where nurses can give each other advice. This attracts tens of thousands of nurses to our platform every single month, and a portion of those use a hiring product as well. A few data points that I want to kind of share with the HR and nursing leaders that are on the call. And just want to emphasize the importance of speed. 68% of nurses accept the very first offer that they get. Especially when they're competing when they're working with multiple different health systems. 61% of nurses accept the very first offer they receive, even if the second or third offer has higher compensation. And so what the common theme that we are seeing across the market is speed is one of the top differentiators. Having streamlined hiring operations internally usually increases the probability of success for hiring nurses. Yes, of course, the employer brand is important, compensation is important, locations are important as well. But sometimes we see this operational excellence is what trumps a lot of those in many of the markets we work with. We ensure that we want to make sure that the hiring is faster as well. So, while the Wellstar team is understaffed, they're spending on premium labor and on overtime and so on. And so it's important from a financial standpoint and from a quality of care standpoint to really get the days to fill down for permanent nurse hiring. And this is just one case study. We got it down from 66 days down to 19 days. And really where we're shaving off time is on time to source. That usually is what is really dragging out the days to fill. And so really for many of the teams we work with, we reduce the time to source down to just a couple of days. We also track retention rates. So when nurses are hired through Incredible Health, the retention rate is usually 15% higher than the health system's baseline. A lot of that is to do with the fact that the nurses were able to consider multiple opportunities before selecting the employer. And so it's a very well thought out job search process in order to make sure that they're hired. Lastly, just wanted to mention how we work together with teams. So this is a true collaboration. It's a true partnership. These are the 8 steps of the hiring process. Incredible Health is doing the heavy lifting in the first 4 steps, sourcing, pre-screening the nurse, making sure they're actively looking and getting that first phone screen scheduled. At that point, the Wellstar talent acquisition and nursing teams take over. They are completing that first phone screen. They are completing hiring manager interviews, and they're getting offers out and accepted. This is a new model that's being adopted in talent acquisition today. It's really ensuring that recruiters are operating at the top of their license as well, right? So we want to make sure that some level of automation is taking care of some administrative work for the recruiters, for example, sourcing. So really recruiters' time can be spent on building relationships with candidates, building relationships with the hiring managers, and ensuring that they're working at the top of their skill set. We do have permission from the Wellstar team to just share a little bit of data. So the average years of experience of nurses that are hired from the Incredible Health platform by the Wellstar team is 9.5 years of RN experience. 70% of the nurses that have been hired on the platform are in hard to fill areas like the ER, the OR, the cath lab, the ICU, and their days to fill is at 28 days, whereas the national average is at 82 days. So I'll pause there. Maybe we'll go through a couple more questions, Jill. One question that came in from Tina is, how do you ensure that your preceptors are engaged and committed to training? There's certainly nurses who are too tired to train and can be exhausted. Like, curious how you think about the motivation around encouraging your nurses to be teachers as well.
Yeah, what a good question. Because as we know, our entire workforce, leaders and staff, are exhausted. Yep. The last 2.5 years has just been grueling. Something that I use the word too much, but it was unimaginable and unprecedented. And so we've heard that, right? Most of us have more openings now than we've ever had. And so if we gain this success in recruiting new team members, or if you will, welcoming back other team members to our teams, we do have to invest in them because things have changed. And the preceptor model is essential within that. So really helping our preceptors work on their own health and well-being has been step one. We offer just a myriad of services to try that meets that individual need and or team need that there might be that we've identified. for that individual. We have preceptor courses, and we have restarted those that really give them the necessary tools and skills. And we actually have a preceptor council across the system that comes together to share best practices, to support one another, to learn from one another. So we've elevated the role of the preceptor. And then the other thing that we had to do during the pandemic, which was really critical, was look at the way we were orienting and onboarding our team members. Now we did some things that we weren't necessarily proud about during the pandemic, as we had to bring on people really quickly, but we did learn that there are different methodologies that we needed to be thinking about associated with orientation onboarding that might actually relieve some of what the preceptors would say, are just skills that somebody else could help and support, where they really bring the critical competency, the knowledge, and that subspecialty expertise to the table. So really trying to change the way that we're doing orientation onboarding has really been our latest focus overall.
Got it. Okay. Another question that came up is just about burnout prevention. We just released our third annual Nursing in the Time of COVID report, and what we're this year 2022 will have the biggest percent of nurses that leave the workforce purely because of burnout and workplace stress. Kind of what are the programs that you've implemented to prevent that?
Yeah, and this is another thing that you can't just have a program for the short run, right? This is going to be an investment. If you think about it, I just met with my one-year nurse residents. So they were one-year graduates from their school that had completed were completing the nurse residency program. That means that the 2 years they were in nursing school and their first year of practice was all COVID. That's the only practice environment that they know. So when I think about burnout, I don't just think about the nurses that were employed at Wellstar. I think about the generation that's entering as well, because they really learned in a very, very different environment and have different needs overall. We took a pretty aggressive approach right out of the gate, because we had a platform for resiliency and well-being that we started back in 2017. And that provided the framework. But again, like everything else, you have to have a menu of opportunities that provides great flexibility in access, as well as the type of well-being or resiliency work that each individual needs. We built resiliency rooms in every single one of our facilities that offer the zero gravity chairs, the glasses, the music, yoga, aromatherapy, a place to have some nutrition, kind of just calm and take a break. But we also have an app that's called Headspace. I actually used it last night. I was traveling from ASHI, and it allows some sleep or meditation or ways to relax in your own home on your own time, and many of them only take 5 or 6 minutes overall. We went with a new EAP vendor that recognized mental health and well-being as a very important component of EAP portfolio of services. And then one of the things that we really focused on was nutrition, personal health, and exercise. We opened all of our health facilities to our 100% of our staff for free. We've been doing a lot of nutrition coaching, having challenges about taking care of yourself first so you can take care of others, and really focusing on personal well-being, both mind, body, and spirit. But this is years in the making. The other thing I would suggest is we have employed evidence-based practices, as well as we are studying the baseline of where our team members are, and we are using that to apply, if you will, the right strategies moving forward, with the Mayo Wellbeing Index as being the tool that we're using to do our research in that space.
Okay. So I think there's a few questions in the chat about Incredible Health. I mean, I know we're almost at time. Please feel free to get in touch with our team. Our website is incrediblehealth.com. Ali just shared in the chat how to schedule a time with our team, and we'll get back to you as quickly as we can. Jill, I wanted to thank you for your time today and for sharing your strategies, your tactics for building a nurse pipeline, for just really thinking about nursing in the future and what it's going to look like, and how our care models need to change, how you've prevented burnout as well. how you've trained your leaders. I mean, this has just like been like filled with a really helpful content. I know that many of the nursing leaders, as well as the HR leaders and HR operations leaders that have joined the call, are looking for strategies and tactics, and they're tackling these very tough topics. So just thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
All right. For everyone else, I know we didn't get to every single question. Please feel free to send more questions in. I have the email address up on the screen, questions@incrediblehealth.com, and we will try to get you the responses as quickly as we can. We almost never have time for all the questions in these calls. And thank you everyone for joining.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Jill. See you.